Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. The first time I saw a deep tire track slicing through my orchard, I knew trouble had arrived. Not just any trouble, this was war on wheels. A smug neighbor, a rusted tractor, and a fake HOA claim were about to turn my quiet farm into a battleground, and I don't lose ground easily. I have lived on this land for over a decade, and I know every inch of it. Every line of grapevines, every patch of grass, every stubborn patch of clay soil. So when I first saw the wide, deep tire tracks cutting across the eastern edge of my orchard, I knew something wasn't right. It wasn't the kind of damage a pickup would leave. These ruts were fat and heavy, like something with a lot of weight behind it. I figured maybe some local kid had borrowed his dad's ATV and decided my property was the perfect racetrack. I muttered under my breath, smoothed the dirt with a shovel, and went back to trimming my vines. A few days later, more tracks appeared, fresh and wet from last night's rain. These weren't random lines. They cut in clean arcs through my rows of young trees, just where the ground was softest. My wife, Laura, suggested I put up some cameras, but I shrugged it off at first. We live in a quiet stretch of Travis County, far enough from the nearest town that trouble rarely finds its way out here. Besides, I've never liked the idea of watching my own land through a lens like I'm running a prison yard. I told myself I'd just keep an eye out, but deep down, I had a feeling this wasn't over. That feeling turned into certainty. One crisp morning when I heard an unmistakable, low mechanical roar drifting from the border of my property. It wasn't the sound of a pickup or a lawnmower. It was the kind of rumbling you feel in your chest, like an old diesel engine coughing through rusted pipes. I followed the noise weaving through the orchard until I saw it. A battered green tractor, the kind that looked like it should have retired sometime back in the 70s. Behind the wheel sat Clint Reese, the so-called king of Silver Pines Estates, which was the HOA development that butted up against my land. The man was driving like he owned the horizon, looping around in lazy circles before turning directly into my property, flattening the edge of my raspberry bushes as if they weren't even there. I waved and yelled, but he didn't stop. He just looked down from his seat, face smug and sunburnt, and drove slower, like he wanted to make sure I saw every inch of rubber chewing up my grass. "Hey!" I shouted, marching across the field. "Get that thing off my land, Clint!" He killed the engine with a clunky cough, leaning on the steering wheel like some cowboy surveying a saloon. "This land is part of Silver Pine's perimeter, Ben," he said in a voice dripping with that HOA authority nonsense. "I'm just maintaining community standards. You should be thanking me for keeping it tidy." I stared at him, my jaw tight. "Community standards? This isn't your land, it's mine. I pay taxes on it. I grow on it. You don't so much as set a boot on this soil without my say-so, let alone roll over it with that junkyard tractor of yours." Clint gave a low chuckle and spat into the dirt. "You think you own it. That's cute. But you're sitting on the HOA's buffer zone, pal. I'm just doing my rounds, making sure our borders stay clean and free from whatever this mess is." He gestured at my vines like they were some kind of invasive weed. I could feel my blood starting to boil. This mess is my orchard. I planted every damn tree with my own hands. If you think for 1 second you're going to treat my land like your personal playground, you're out of your mind. "Call it what you want," he said with a smirk, starting the engine again. "You'll be hearing from the board soon. We don't let squatters run wild around here." Squatters. The word hit me like a brick to the face. I took a step closer, close enough to smell the faint stench of motor oil and sweat rolling off him. "You stay off my property, Clint. You and your board. You set one more tire on my land, and I'll have the sheriff out here so fast it'll make your head spin." He smiled like I'd just told him the punchline of a bad joke. Then, without another word, he turned the tractor and deliberately took the long route back, cutting across another patch of my vines on the way out. The sound of the tires chewing through my soil made my teeth grind. When I got back to the house, Laura was standing on the porch with her arms crossed, watching me like she already knew what had happened. "Was it him?" she asked. "Yeah," I muttered. "Clint. Acting like my land is some HOA community garden." Her eyes narrowed. "You're calling the lawyer, right?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah. But first, I'm setting up some damn cameras." The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, slid under my gate like some poisoned gift. At first, I thought it was just another piece of junk mail or one of those flyers for lawn care services. But when I saw the bold header, Silver Pines Estates Homeowners Association, Notice of Violation, my stomach sank. I ripped it open on the spot, standing by the mailbox, the smell of diesel from Clint's tractor still lingering in my mind from the day before. The letter read like something out of a bad sitcom. According to the board, my residence and activities were unauthorized and not compliant with the architectural plan of Silver Pines. They gave me 30 days to vacate the premises or face legal action. My hands clenched the paper so tightly I nearly tore it in half. This was my land, purchased fair and square, with taxes paid every year. I didn't owe these HOA clowns a single ounce of explanation. I marched into the house and slapped the letter down on the kitchen table in front of Laura. She skimmed it, eyebrows shooting up so high I thought they might never come down. "They're threatening to evict you from your own farm? That's insane," she said. "Not just insane," I muttered. "It's war." I called my attorney, a sharp-witted woman named Catherine who dealt with plenty of property disputes in her time. When I read her the letter, she laughed, a cold, knowing laugh. "They can't do that, Ben. Your property deed predates Silver Pines by decades. Send me a copy of this letter and your documents, and I'll draft a response that'll knock them flat." That afternoon, I made copies of every important document, my deed, the tax receipts, even a scanned map from the county clerk showing my property. Line in bold black ink. I felt better after mailing them to Catherine, but I knew this wouldn't end with a strongly worded letter. People like Clint and his precious HOA didn't understand reason. They understood pressure. The next morning, I was hauling compost out to the orchard when I heard the distant rumble of that tractor again. I looked up to see Clint cruising along the border like some wannabe sheriff patrolling his territory. He slowed down when he saw me, the corners of his mouth curling into that irritating grin. I walked straight up to the edge of the fence line and held up my phone, recording every second of it. "Morning, Ben," he drawled. "You get my letter? The board's real concerned about that junk you've got growing out here. Maybe it's time you think about moving along." "This land isn't yours," I said, my voice steady. "I've got every legal document proving that. You keep harassing me, and I'll have more than just a lawyer on you." He shrugged, as if my words rolled right off him. "We'll see what the county says. Folks around here don't take kindly to outsiders messing up the landscape." I bit back the urge to curse him out and instead raised my phone higher, making sure I caught the smug look on his face. "Smile, Clint. This is evidence." That must have gotten under his skin because he revved the engine and took off, deliberately cutting across a patch of my grass on his way out. I cursed under my breath and inspected the damage. Nothing major, but every rut felt like a personal insult. By the end of that week, I had cameras set up around the orchard, all wired to my phone. It didn't take long for them to catch Clint in the act. One evening, just before dusk, I saw a notification pop up on my screen. There he was, lumbering along the property line on that rusty beast, dipping one wheel over the border like he wanted to test my patience. Then, without hesitation, he drove straight across the drip lines for my raspberry bushes, crushing them under the weight. I could practically hear the plastic tubing snapping in my mind. The next morning, I took the footage to the local sheriff's office. The deputy behind the desk was polite but non-committal. "Technically, this is a civil issue," he said, glancing at the screen. "If it were vandalism, that'd be one thing, but proving intent..." I leaned in. He's been warned. He knows damn well where my property starts. I'm not waiting until he levels half my orchard. The deputy sighed and promised to file a report, but I walked out knowing it wouldn't stop Clint. If anything, I suspected this would only make him bolder. That night, Laura found me at the kitchen table surrounded by maps and documents, my laptop open to a county land registry page. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Building a wall," I muttered. "Not a real one, not yet. But I'm going to make damn sure these people know where my land begins and ends, and I'm going to make them regret crossing that line." I didn't have to wait long for the next strike. Just 3 days after sending the HOA's ridiculous letter to my lawyer, I woke up to find my eastern orchard looking like a crime scene. The drip irrigation lines I'd spent hours laying out were ripped and flattened, shredded as though a herd of cattle had stampeded through. But I didn't have cattle there. I had Clint and his damn tractor. I walked along the rows, my boots sinking slightly into the damp earth, and my stomach twisted as I saw the damage. The tubes were crushed, valves snapped clean off, and one of my young apple saplings was tilted sideways, its roots exposed. I knew this wasn't an accident. The footage from the new cameras would confirm what I already suspected. I pulled out my phone and checked the feed. There it was, clear as daylight. Clint perched high on his clunky green tractor, deliberately cutting across the rows like a vengeful lawnmower. He even stopped at one point, climbed down, and took photos of the wreckage as if he was documenting some crime I had committed. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just about boundary lines anymore. He was trying to bait me. Laura found me replaying the video, jaw tight and fists clenched. "You're calling the sheriff again, right?" she asked, her voice sharp with anger. "Oh, I'm not just calling," I said, already scrolling through my contacts. "I'm filing a report so thick, they'll have to use it as a doorstop." By the time the deputy showed up, I was seething. I walked him through the orchard, showing him the damage, pointing out the camera angles, the timestamps, the smirk on Clint's face in one perfect still shot. "That's willful destruction of private property," I said. "What more do you need to arrest this guy?" The deputy, a young guy with a buzz cut and a badge that seemed too shiny to have seen real trouble, scratched his head. "I get it, Mr. Coalfield. I do. But technically, this is still considered a civil dispute unless we can prove intent beyond doubt. He could say he was maintaining a border or that he didn't realize where your land starts." I glared at him. "Look at that picture. He's standing on my irrigation lines with his boots, taking photos like he's proud of what he did. That's intent." The deputy sighed. "We'll file this, and I'll speak with Mr. Reese, but I can't promise much. The best course of action might be pursuing a restraining order or a civil suit." I didn't like it, but I nodded. "Fine, you do your talk. I'll do mine. But you tell Clint that if his tractor even grazes my fence line again, I'll call you, the sheriff, and the county commissioner if I have to." When the deputy left, Laura was standing on the porch, arms folded, her face as tight as mine. "You know this isn't going to stop him," she said. "No," I admitted, "but we're going to hit back harder." That afternoon, I started reinforcing the borders. I placed bright new signs along the fence: private property, no trespassing. I even painted the posts neon orange to make them impossible to miss. Later that evening, as I was locking up the shed, my phone buzzed with another camera notification. I opened the feed expecting a stray raccoon or maybe the wind knocking something loose, but no, it was Clint again. This time creeping along the border like he was inspecting my signs. He stopped just short of the line, leaning on the tractor wheel with one hand and glaring straight into the camera lens like he knew I was watching. The next day, something unexpected landed in my lap. As I was checking the mailbox, I spotted a black folder lying in the ditch just outside the gate. It was damp from dew, but still intact. I picked it up and flipped it open, and my jaw nearly dropped. Inside were printed maps with the HOA's logo, showing Silver Pine's official boundary lines. But they weren't the real county maps. These were doctored, with my 12 acres conveniently swallowed into their community buffer zone. It was so absurd I laughed, but the laugh was short and bitter. If they were willing to fake maps, what else would they do? I tucked the folder under my arm and headed back to the house. Laura was waiting with a fresh pot of coffee. "You're smiling," she said, raising an eyebrow. "Because now," I replied, tossing the folder onto the table, "I've got proof that Clint and his precious board are cooking up more than just trouble. This is fraud, and I'll burn them with it." By the end of that week, I was done playing nice. The sight of my broken irrigation line still burned in my head every time I walked through the orchard. The young vines I had spent months nursing back to life now stood half crushed, leaves drooping, roots exposed like open wounds. And yet, I knew Clint wasn't done. The man was the kind of stubborn that thrives on resistance. Give him an inch, and he'll take an entire acre just to prove a point. The black folder I found by the gate was the perfect weapon, and I couldn't stop flipping through it like some dark little treasure chest. Inside, I saw page after page of fake maps with my property boundaries altered. They had redrawn the line so that my orchard, my shed, and even part of my damn house were labeled as Silver Pines Estates Community Buffer Zone. I'd seen plenty of audacity in my life, but this took the crown. I scanned every page, emailed them to Catherine, and called her the moment the files were uploaded. "Good Lord," she muttered over the phone. "Ben, this isn't just a nuisance claim. If they're circulating this as an official record, it's fraud. We're going to bury them." Her words gave me a spark of hope, but I still had to live with Clint breathing down my neck every day. He made sure I saw him, riding his tractor like some aging warlord patrolling the border of my property. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the fields orange, I heard his engine roaring closer than ever. I grabbed my phone, already recording, and stepped out onto the front yard. "Evening, Ben," Clint called out over the engine noise. His voice carried that false cheer, the kind that's meant to provoke. "Just making sure these borders are clean. You really should take better care of community property." "This isn't community property," I shouted back. "It's mine. And I've got more proof than you'll ever have. Stay off my land." He just grinned and revved the engine. Instead of turning back, he swung the tractor wide, deliberately plowing over the edge of my raspberry patch. I felt a pulse of white-hot anger run through me as I heard the drip line snap under his wheels. I stormed down to the fence line, fists clenched. "One more inch, Clint. One more, and I'll have you arrested for trespassing. I've got you on camera this time. No excuses." Clint shut off the engine and leaned back on the seat like a king on a throne. "Call who you want. The sheriff, the mayor, the damn governor. The board knows this land belongs to Silver Pines, and I've got the community behind me. You're just one man, Ben. One man squatting on land you don't deserve." I didn't even bother to argue. I just pointed at the cameras mounted on my fence posts, little blinking eyes catching every second of his smug face. "Keep talking, Clint. Every word you say is going to look real good in court." Later that night, as I reviewed the footage, I saw something else that made my jaw tighten. Clint wasn't just joyriding. He had climbed off his tractor, taken a hammer from his toolbox, and smashed one of the smaller water valves at the edge of the field. He knew exactly what he was doing. I sent that clip straight to Catherine with a note. If this isn't proof of intent, I don't know what is. The next morning, I decided enough was enough. I went into town to meet Catherine in person, bringing the folder of fake maps, the videos, and printed photos of the damage. She didn't even bother hiding her anger. "We'll file the claim for property damage first," she said, "but I want to go after them for harassment and false boundary claims. If they're dumb enough to fake maps, they're dumb enough to leave a paper trail." When I got home that afternoon, Clint had upped his game. A letter with the HOA's letterhead was pinned to my gate, sealed in a plastic sleeve like some kind of official summons. It read, "You are in violation of HOA landscaping standards and community design." I tore it down and crumpled it in my hand. Landscaping standards. I'd been growing crops here long before Silver Pines existed. That night, Laura found me pacing the kitchen, folder open on the counter, coffee gone cold. "What now?" she asked softly. "Now," I said, "we build a case that makes them regret ever setting foot near my fence. They want a war? Fine. Let's give them one." I knew that fighting Clint and his HOA circus on my own terms meant taking the next step. Waiting around for them to back off was pointless. People like Clint don't retreat unless you push them into a corner. So, early Monday morning, I drove into town to meet with Catherine again. I handed over the updated footage, the tractor crushing my raspberry patch, Clint smashing a water valve, and the so-called HOA notice they had pinned to my gate. She glanced at the papers, then looked up at me with that razor-sharp smile of hers. "They're getting desperate," she said. "That's good. Desperation leaves evidence. We'll file a formal complaint for trespassing and property damage today. But I'm also going to pull the official records for Silver Pines, see if they've been submitting any of these fake maps to the county." By midweek, Catherine called me with news. "Ben, you're going to want to hear this," she said. "They've already tried filing their altered boundary map as an amendment to their HOA charter. It's laughable. It has no legal teeth, but it's enough to confuse neighbors who don't know better." Confusion was exactly what Clint wanted. That same evening, I caught him hosting some sort of HOA pep rally on the gravel road that separated my property from theirs. There must have been a dozen of them, all dressed like they were going to a Sunday picnic, except their faces looked sour enough to curdle milk. Clint stood on the hood of his tractor like he was delivering a sermon. I could hear him from my front porch. "This man," he boomed, waving his arms in my direction, "has taken advantage of Silver Pines for too long. He's ruining the community with his eyesore farm and refuses to pay his fair share." Eyesore farm. I nearly laughed at the absurdity of it. My vineyard and orchard looked better than any chemically treated lawns in that HOA nightmare. But the laughter died when I saw a few of my quieter neighbors nodding along. People believe nonsense if it's shouted loud enough. I didn't wait for his speech to finish. I grabbed my phone, a stack of official documents, and walked straight to the fence line. "You folks hear this nonsense," I said, holding up my deed. "This land's been mine for over a decade. It's not part of your HOA, and it never will be." Clint smirked down at me from his perch. "Ben, why don't you just make this easy on yourself? Sign the papers, join the association, and you can stay. Otherwise, 30 days and you're out." I pulled a folded county map from my back pocket and slapped it against the fence post. See this line? That's the real border, not the fantasy line you drew in that boardroom. You've been trespassing on my property, and I've got a surveyor coming tomorrow to prove it once and for all. That got some murmurs from the crowd. A few of them looked uneasy, like they weren't quite sure who to believe anymore. Clint's smug expression faltered just a little. The next day, a certified surveyor, a guy named Rodriguez, came out with all his equipment, tripods, laser rangefinders, the whole works. We walked the perimeter while he marked every single foot with neon flags. Sure enough, the results showed Clint's so-called community buffer zone included a good 80 feet of my property. That wasn't just a mistake, it was theft, plain and simple. When Clint drove by that evening, I waved a copy of the survey results at him. Hope your board likes reading legal documents because this is going straight to court. His face tightened, the kind of tight that means someone's losing control. You'll regret this, Ben, he said, voice low and ugly. We've dealt with people like you before. Good, I replied, dead calm. Then you already know how it's going to end. That night, I emailed Catherine the survey data, the footage, and a full log of every incident so far. I was done waiting for them to make the next move. The lawsuit was going to hit Silver Pines like a hammer, and I intended to swing it hard. The night before our first court filing, I woke up to a sound that had become all too familiar, the low, throaty growl of Clint's tractor echoing in the dark, like some mechanical beast prowling for prey. I grabbed my jacket, slipped on my boots, and stepped out onto the porch. There, under the pale wash of moonlight, I saw him. Clint was circling the border of my property like a vulture, his headlights cutting through the night as he veered dangerously close to my new survey markers. I pulled out my phone and started recording, zooming in as he rolled right over one of the neon flags Rodriguez had placed just the day before. He stopped the tractor, dismounted, and stood there with his hands on his hips, staring at my fence as though he was daring me to come out and confront him. Well, I took the dare. I jumped into my old Chevy pickup, roared down the dirt driveway, and skidded to a stop between him and my orchard. "You've lost your damn mind, Clint," I yelled, stepping out of the truck. "That's felony trespassing, and you're doing it on camera." Clint grinned, his teeth flashing in the headlights. "It's not trespassing if the land's ours, Ben. You can record all you want, but the board will back me." They always do. I walked right up to him, close enough that I could smell the sour mix of sweat and diesel. "You touch one more thing on this property, and I swear I'll have you in cuffs before sunrise." "Go ahead, call the cops," he said, pulling a folded piece of paper from his jacket. "Here's our new map straight from the HOA office. Says right here, your little patch of weeds belongs to Silver Pines." He held it up like it was the 10 Commandments. I snatched the paper from his hand. One glance told me everything I needed to know. The map was nothing but another cheap forgery, a shoddy attempt to overwrite real county records. I tore it in half and dropped the pieces at his feet. "Nice try." "That's not worth the paper it's printed on." He growled something under his breath, climbed back onto his tractor, and revved the engine like a threat. "This isn't over, Ben. You're going to regret crossing me." Then he jerked the tractor around, clipping one of my irrigation pipes as he sped off into the dark. By the time I got back to the house, Laura was waiting with a phone in her hand. "I called the sheriff," she said, her voice tight. "They're sending someone." 20 minutes later, a county patrol car pulled up, its lights flashing red against the rows of grapevines. Deputy Matthews, a seasoned officer who'd seen plenty of feuds in rural Texas, stepped out and shook his head as I showed him the latest footage. "This guy's looking for a fight," Matthews said. "We can log this as a criminal trespass warning. If he steps foot on your land again, we can arrest him." "Do it," I said, my tone flat. "I want every single thing he's done on record." The next day, Catherine filed our first round of paperwork: trespassing, property damage, harassment. She even attached the nighttime video of Clint as Exhibit A. When she called me, her voice had a hint of satisfaction. "This is textbook, Ben. They can't bluff their way out of this." But Clint wasn't done playing games. That same afternoon, I found a fresh stack of letters in my mailbox, official-looking complaints from Silver Pines addressed to the county zoning board. According to them, my agricultural operations were an eyesore and posed a risk to community property values. It was laughable, but I knew the game they were playing. Drown me in paperwork. Make me spend time fighting lies instead of tending my crops. Laura suggested going public. "What if we talk to someone at the Travis Gazette?" she asked over dinner. If people see what's happening, maybe the HOA will think twice. She wasn't wrong. The next morning, I called a local reporter I knew from town. By that afternoon, she was standing on my porch, taking photos of my orchard and recording my account of Clint's antics. When I showed her the video of the tractor crushing my vines, her eyebrows shot up. "This is gold," she said. "People are going to eat this up." That night, as I checked the cameras again, I saw Clint's tractor parked just outside the HOA gate, like a rusted guard dog. But for the first time in weeks, I wasn't angry. I was ready. He had pushed me as far as I'd go. Now it was my turn to hit back. The courthouse in Travis County looked like an old brick fortress, the kind of place where justice either stood tall or got buried under paperwork. I walked through those heavy doors with Catherine at my side, carrying a folder so thick it could stop a bullet. Inside that folder were every map, every time-stamped photo, every video clip of Clint's tractor tearing up my orchard. It felt like I was lugging not just evidence, but weeks of frustration and fury. Clint was already there, dressed like he was about to negotiate a used car sale. Starched white shirt, bolo tie, and that same smug look plastered across his face. Behind him sat two other HOA board members, both with their arms crossed like they were the enforcers of some neighborhood mafia. He glanced my way and smirked, as if this was just another chance to show off his dominance. The hearing began with formalities, but Catherine wasted no time. She stood tall and addressed the judge with a clarity that cut through the stale air. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Coalfield, has endured weeks of trespassing, property destruction, and harassment at the hands of the HOA and its president, Mr. Reese. We have extensive documentation proving not only the trespasses, but deliberate damage to irrigation systems and crops." She laid out the evidence like she was dealing cards, each one hitting the table with weight. Photos, videos, survey reports. Clint's lawyer, a slick man with too much gel in his hair, tried to argue that my land was part of community buffer zones established under the HOA's charter. Catherine smiled, the kind of smile that says, "You just stepped into my trap," and slid the official county survey across the table. "This," she said, "is the legally recognized boundary. The HOA's so-called maps are falsified, which we have confirmed through the county records office. Mr. Reese and his board have been deliberately misrepresenting property lines in order to intimidate my client." The judge, a no-nonsense woman with silver hair and glasses perched on the tip of her nose, leaned forward to inspect the survey. Her frown deepened as she flipped through the fake HOA maps Catherine had included as exhibits. "Mr. Reese," she said sharply, "are you seriously trying to claim land that the county records show belongs to this man?" Clint cleared his throat, looking like a schoolboy caught stealing lunch money. "We believed, that is, the board believed, that this area was meant to be part of Silver Pine's landscaping. Belief," the judge snapped, "is not ownership. You've been driving heavy equipment onto this man's land, destroying his crops and infrastructure. Do you deny this?" Clint shifted in his seat, jaw tight. I was maintaining what I thought was our border. Catherine seized the moment, playing one of the videos from my cameras on a small monitor. It showed Clint's tractor rolling over my irrigation lines, the metal crushing plastic with an ugly snap. There was no mistaking the intent. The judge shook her head and muttered something under her breath that sounded a lot like "unbelievable." By midday, it was clear we were winning. Witnesses came forward, even a couple of Silver Pines residents who'd grown tired of Clint's antics. One elderly man admitted under oath that the board had pressured him into signing petitions against me, claiming I was an unauthorized squatter, though he knew my farm had been here long before Silver Pines was built. The verdict was swift. The judge ruled entirely in my favor, ordering Clint and the HOA to cease all activity on my property and pay damages for the destruction they'd caused. On top of that, Clint was served with a restraining order. He was forbidden from coming within 500 feet of my land with his tractor or any other equipment. Clint's face turned the color of sunburned clay. He muttered something to his lawyer and stormed out of the courtroom like a man who'd just been stripped of his crown. I stood there for a moment, almost stunned. Weeks of harassment, of second-guessing myself, of watching my hard work get flattened, all of it vindicated in a single afternoon. Catherine gave me a firm pat on the shoulder. "That's round one," she said. "We're also pursuing reimbursement for legal fees and crop loss. Trust me, they won't forget this anytime soon." That evening, I returned to the farm with a sense of calm I hadn't felt in weeks. But as I looked out over my orchard, I knew this wasn't the end. People like Clint don't just fade quietly into the background. He'd come back, maybe not with his tractor, but with some other scheme, and I'd be ready. The morning after the verdict, the air on the farm felt different. Lighter, cleaner, like the land itself was breathing a sigh of relief. For the first time in weeks, I walked through my orchard without that constant knot of tension in my chest. The irrigation system was still battered, the grass scarred by tire tracks, but at least now I knew Clint's tractor would never roll across my property again. The restraining order was clear, and Catherine had made sure every law enforcement officer in Travis County had a copy of it. Word of the trial spread fast. By noon, a reporter from the Travis Gazette was back at my gate, asking for photos of the orchard and a quote for the story. I gave them a simple line: "It's not about winning a fight, it's about protecting what's yours." That evening, the article ran with a headline that made me chuckle: "Local farmer defeats HOA tyranny." Clint's name was all over it, and not in a flattering way. Silver Pines Estates scrambled to control the damage. Within a week, the HOA board called an emergency meeting to address leadership changes. Rumor had it Clint had been pressured to resign as president, his reputation shattered beyond repair. I didn't bother to show up, but one of the neighbors who had testified on my behalf stopped by to give me the highlights. He tried to play the victim, the man said, shaking his head. But after the judge's ruling and those fake maps coming to light, nobody's buying his act anymore. To my surprise, a few neighbors even came by to apologize. One woman who'd once ignored me on the road showed up with a pie and a sheepish smile. "I believed all that garbage Clint was spreading," she admitted. "I thought you were some kind of squatter." "I'm sorry, Ben. Your land's beautiful, and I hope you keep it that way." I thanked her, though I couldn't resist thinking how quickly people switch sides once the tide turns. A week later, the compensation check arrived. Damages for the destroyed irrigation lines, lost crops, and legal fees. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to repair what Clint had wrecked and upgrade my fencing. I spent the next few days putting up a new line of tall, dense evergreens along the border, a living wall that marked my property as clearly as a fortress. On each end of the fence, I placed shiny metal signs that read, "Private property, no homeowners association jurisdiction." The best moment came 2 weeks later when I saw a flatbed truck rolling past my gate with Clint's beloved tractor chained to the back. I heard from a neighbor that he had been forced to sell it to cover part of the court costs. I stood there watching it drive away, sipping my coffee, and couldn't help but smile. It felt like the last chapter of this ridiculous saga. Life slowly returned to normal. Laura and I planted new rows of grapes to replace the damaged ones, and the orchard began to look alive again. We even hosted a small barbecue for some of the neighbors who'd stood up to Clint during the trial. It wasn't about celebrating victory. It was about reclaiming the peace we'd worked so hard to protect. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the fields glowed gold, I sat on the porch with Laura, a beer in my hand, and looked out over the land. "Do you think it's finally over?" she asked. "For Clint?" I smirked. "Yeah, I think so. But if another HOA hotshot decides to come after us, they'll know better than to bring a tractor to my doorstep." We laughed, the kind of laugh that comes when the fight is done and the silence feels earned. Out beyond the orchard, the rows of evergreens stood tall, a green wall against the world. My land, my rules, and nobody, not Clint, not some power-hungry HOA, was ever going to change that.